Hey guys, tonight we're taking a trip northway north. Not to the land of modern fjords and electric saunas, but to the smoke-scented longhouses of early medieval Scandinavia, just as the first snow begins to fall. You're not a raider tonight. No ships, no dragons carved into bowsprits, no clanking of looted silver. Instead, you're in wool Soxwell. Whatever counts as sock sand, you're about to learn what it actually meant to winter with the Vikings. Spoiler: you probably won't survive this. Not because of war or wolves, but because your modern spine isn't built for sleeping on straw, and your idea of cold involves central heating and complaint tweets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing which corners of the world are drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first snow doesn't fall so much as whisper. It arrives quietly, blanketing the low hills and the sloped thatched roofs with a thin layer of early warning. You wake to cold air and quiet, the world suddenly muffled under a sheet of white. Someone is already up, feeding the fire. You hear the crackle, the low sigh of burning birch, and you huddle deeper under the woolen cloak someone mercifully threw over your legs. Winter is here, and there is no more raiding, which is fine, really, because your hands are cracked, your boots are leaking, and you've got at least 3 bruises you don't remember earning. The last sea trip ended with more shouting than silver, and a boat that's now propped up on blocks, its hull half rotted from the inside. The sea's frozen at the edges now, and the wind off the fjord smells like wet iron. The decision is made without ceremony. No one announces, "Raiding season is over." It's just understood. The longships are pulled ashore, turned upside down like sleeping beasts. The sails are folded, patched, and stored. And then, you shut the world in. The livestock is gathered sheep, goats, a couple of oxen that do not enjoy the process. They're herded into the animal shelter next to the longhouse, separated by a thin timber wall that only slightly muffles the smell. The pigs grumble in chorus, annoyed at the cold floor and the end of their free-roaming days. You help patch the thatch. You stuff moss between the logs of the walls. You wrap extra hide around the entrance post. These are the rituals of hibernation, not sleeping through the winter, but prepping to endure it, Viking style. The longhouse itself groans as it settles. Built low and wide, it's a living structure. The wooden beams creak. The turf roof sags slightly with the snow. Inside, there's one central hearth, and everyone sleeps around it: parents, kids, servants, distant cousins, who won't stop singing when they're drunk. You find a corner and claim it with your cloak, your boots, and the dignity of someone trying not to step on a sleeping dog. Over the next few days, the outside world slowly disappears. Paths vanish under snow. The fjord freezes farther. The boats don't move. Even the chickens look confused. And the humans? They adjust. You stop checking the door. You start measuring time by how many logs it takes to get through a conversation. You learn the difference between warm wool and "you're about to get chilblains" wool. Your boots never dry, but you stop noticing. You sleep near the hearth. You smell like hearth, but there's comfort in the rhythm. Wake. Stoke the fire. Milk something. Patch something. Eat. Try not to argue. Try not to freeze. Repeat. Sometimes, in the morning, someone mentions spring. A joke. A prayer. A threat. You all laugh. The same tired laugh. Spring will come. Eventually. But first, there is a lot of winter. The second week of winter arrives not with a storm, but with the slow, creeping realization that you should have chopped more wood, much more. You realize this around dawn, when someone starts pulling bark off a beam near the hearth and everyone pretends not to notice. You put on your boots, which are still damp and faintly mushroom-scented, and head outside. The snow is knee-deep, glittering under a pale sun that doesn't so much rise as hover in the general direction of morning. Your job today? Haul wood. Lots of it. The axe handle is slick, and your gloves are made from stitched-together scraps of wool and optimism. Still, you manage to get a rhythm-going swing. Split, stack until your arms go numb, and your nose has become a frozen carrot of regret. Firewood isn't optional here. Not in a Viking winter. It's not just for heat, it's for light, for cooking, for boiling snow into water, for keeping your fingers attached to your body. The longhouse needs a steady supply, or it turns into a very decorative tomb. Back inside, the fire is finally crackling strong again. You thaw out by standing dangerously close, boots steaming, face half melted. Someone hands you a bowl of dried fish stew, and you chew slowly, trying not to wonder if it's the same fish you saw get dropped into the hearth yesterday. Most of the food right now is preserved. That means dried, salted, smoked, or buried in a barrel and vaguely pickled. You eat root vegetables with no clear identity. You chew on hard bread so dense it could be used to reinforce the roof beams. You sip broth that smells like it remembers summer, but not clearly. There's also fermented milk, thick, sour, and slightly fizzy. It's either an acquired taste or a prank. You're not sure yet, but the centerpiece of winter prep, the real MVP of not dying in Scandinavia, is fish. Dried fish. Racks of it. Whole walls of it. Cod. Herring. Sometimes something nobody wants to name. It hangs in the rafters like scaly laundry, each piece stiff as a board, each bite a crunch followed by chewy defiance. You help turn the racks once a week. Not out of efficiency, out of tradition. Someone insists the fish must be rotated, or it grows legs. They may be joking, they may not. Outside, others are busy with ice fishing. You're invited, handed a spear, and led onto the frozen fjord by a man named Orm, who doesn't blink and definitely has frostbite in one ear. You sit near a hole in the ice, watching the line for hours, breath curling into little ghosts that hover above your lap. You catch one fish. It's small, angry, and frozen, solid, within minutes. Orm calls it a good day. You return home, cheeks numb, fish in hand, proud. Until you learn someone else caught 8 and is already bragging about it in verse. You chew your dinner quietly. At night, you learn the art of sock drying. Viking socks, if you can even call them that, are thick, hand-knit tubes that bunch at the ankle and stay damp for sport. They're dried by the fire on sticks, on rocks, on your own legs. Everyone has a different method. None work. One night, someone's socks catch fire. They stomp it out. No one panics. This happens more often than you'd expect. You also help with soap making, which mostly involves ash, animal fat, and hope. The resulting product smells faintly of bacon and disaster, but it's better than nothing. You learn to love that smell, because it means you've cleaned your hands before a meal, because it means someone went to the trouble of stirring a pot full of lard and lye for hours, because in a longhouse sealed tight for winter, even soap that smells like barbecue is a luxury. And through it all, you begin to settle. You accept that your clothes will always be damp, that your eyebrows might freeze together, that the dried fish will always be watching. You wake to the sound of firewood snapping. You eat by firelight. You go to sleep under a pelt that smells like goat ambition. And when someone says, "Spring now," you don't laugh. You just grunt. Like a true Viking, by the 3rd week of winter, your whole life exists inside one building, the longhouse. You start forgetting what fresh air smells like. You can't remember what color grass is. And the idea of sunlight warming your skin feels like something you once dreamed about on purpose. You live, now, in a world of low ceilings, smoky rafters, and the faint, ever-present smell of boiled turnip and sweaty wool. Congratulations. You've officially become indoor people. The longhouse is long, yes, but it's also deceptively small when filled with 22 humans, 6 dogs, several chickens that no one seems to admit owning, and a goat who insists it lives inside now. The structure is timber-framed, packed with turf and moss, designed to hold in heat and keep out storms. Which it does, mostly. Inside, everything revolves around the central hearth. It's the heart of the home, the campfire of the north, and also the most reliable way to burn your tunic if you turn around too fast. You spend a lot of time sitting near it, sometimes just staring into the flames like they owe you money. The smoke rises to the rafters and mostly stays there mostly. There's a hole in the roof, sure, but it works about as well as you'd expect for a design that involves cutting a hole in your insulation. On especially cold days, the smoke hangs lower, turning the whole house into a kind of meat-scented fog machine. You learn to breathe through your sleeve. Sleeping is communal. You don't have your own room. You don't even have your own corner. What you have is a spot near the wall, a straw mattress you share with a cousin who snores like a drowning bear, and a cloak that doesn't reach your feet. There is no privacy. None. You change clothes under a blanket, or just stop caring. Someone is always singing, humming, sharpening something, or talking about a dream they had where they fought a walrus and won. You nod like that's normal. There's a rhythm to it, though. A kind of communal choreography. People move around each other like they've memorized the floor plan of bodies. You duck, they step, you shuffle, they pass. And somehow, you don't trip over the fire dog sleeping dead center like a furry obstacle course. The daily schedule is loose but constant. Someone's always tending the fire. Someone's always cooking something in a pot that never empties, just absorbs ingredients and evolves. Someone's spinning wool. Someone's fixing a boot. Someone's playing a bone flute that sounds like sadness and wet leather. Children run underfoot like mischievous spirits. They're wild-eyed, bundled in tunics that don't quite fit, constantly inventing games that mostly involve throwing things at each other and blaming the goat. Evenings are busiest. Everyone is indoors by then, crowding close to the fire, passing bowls of stew, drinking thin ale, and comparing bruises they got from slipping on the icy path to the outhouse. Someone tells a story. Someone sings. Someone makes a joke about that one time your cousin tried to tan a seal hide indoors, and no one forgives him for it. You laugh, you cough, you brush the ash off your cloak. Historians believe that longhouses weren't just shelters, they were social ecosystems, places of family, of oral tradition, of mutual endurance. They weren't comfortable by modern standards, but they worked. They kept people alive. And, most importantly, they kept people together. You feel that closeness, now not just in the way your elbow is jammed against your neighbor's knee, but in the way people shift around you. Someone passes you a cup without looking. Someone else tosses you a scrap of wool to mend your glove. There's no instruction, no obligation. Just rhythm. Sometimes it gets to you the claustrophobia, the repetition, the smell of boiled onion that seems to have fused with your pores. You step outside for air, even though it's 20 below, and your breath freezes mid-sentence. You come back inside anyway, because it's better in here. Warmer, safer, home, at night, wrapped in layers of wool, tucked under a hide that smells like the animal it used to be. You drift off to the sounds of coughing, murmuring, the crackle of fire, and someone snoring in F sharp. You dream of warm grass, of wind that doesn't hurt, of a sky that's blue instead of bruised. You sleep lightly. You wake often, but you are surviving. And in the Viking winter, that's the job. You wake up to the smell of something bubbling. Maybe it's stew. Maybe it's socks being boiled for revenge. You don't ask. You just sit up slowly, peel the wool blanket from your face, and blink at the half-darkness inside the longhouse. The fire's already going. That's the good news. The bad news is that breakfast is the same as dinner. Again, you shuffle over, cup in hand, and receive your morning portion of barley musha grayish gloopy porridge that tastes exactly how it looks. It's warm, which is all you can reasonably ask for. You chew slowly, quietly, trying not to bite down too hard on the occasional mystery grit. Someone once joked it's to keep your teeth sharp. Someone else said it's just sand from the storage pit. Nobody's corrected either of them. Welcome to the Viking winter diet. In the cold months, everything slows down, including food variety. The gardens are buried in snow, the rivers are frozen, and hunting is risky unless you enjoy snow blindness and frostbitten toes. So you rely on what was preserved before the freeze, which, for you, means eating your way through barrels of dried, salted, and pickled everything. There's dried fish still, staring at you. Dried meat chewy enough to make your jaw consider early retirement. Dried apple small, leathery, and a reminder that fruit once existed. And of course, roots. Turnips, carrots, onions. Stored in pits dug into the frozen earth, wrapped in straw, guarded like treasure. You'd commit minor crimes for a fresh parsnip right now. And you eat a lot of gruel. That's not an insult, it's a fact. Barley, oats, rye, sometimes all three at once if someone got creative. The base is always the same. Water, grain, fire. Everything else is improvisation. If you're lucky, you get bits of dried mushroom, or the last slice of smoked sausage from the rafter stash. If you're less lucky, you get a handful of wilted cabbage someone found behind the goat pen. Spices? Not unless you count salt and desperation. Though you do occasionally get a hint of juniper, or some dill tucked in with the fish. Once, someone tossed in a handful of dried elderberries. That was a party. The most exciting thing you've tasted all week was fermented flatbread. Someone left it too close to the fire and called it crispy. You called it edible. Barely. Drinks? Mostly thin ale, brewed weak on purpose so you can drink it all day without accidentally declaring war on your cousin. Water is suspicious in winter freezing, scarce, and prone to picking up the flavor of whatever wooden bucket it's stored in. So you drink the ale, or snowmelt when you're outside. Sometimes both. Sometimes at the same time. Historians still debate just how nutritious the Viking winter diet was. On the one hand, it was heavy on calories, fat, and protein, exactly what you need when it's 20 below, and you're wearing the same tunic for the 6th day in a row. On the other hand, there was scurvy. A lot of it. Probably more than anyone wanted to admit. Some communities figured out that pine needles or fish liver helped. Others just got really good at pretending their teeth weren't falling out. You keep chewing. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just necessary. By midday, you're helping stir the next pot. A stew this time, barley again, a splash of milk, and a tiny bit of smoked lamb someone had hidden in a linen pouch behind the hearth. It's a rare treat, and everyone leans in a little closer when it starts to smell like actual meat instead of suggestion. Meal prep becomes a group effort. Chopping frozen roots with dull knives. Boiling water for hours just to soften dried beans. Adding old bread to new stews so nothing goes to waste. You're starting to see food not as a luxury, but as a craft. Something that requires attention, patience, and the ability to eat the same thing 17 different ways without crying. You're also learning the delicate art of meal distribution. The elders eat first, then the warriors, then the rest of you. And while no one goes hungry, if the longhouse is managed, well, it's clear that pecking order doesn't end at the mead hall door. You earn your ladlefuls by showing up early, working hard, and not complaining when you find a feather in your soup. And sometimes, it's worth the wait. One night, someone pulls out a whole wheel of goat cheese from under a bench, still wrapped in straw. The cheers are loud enough to wake the goat, who may or may not be missing it. You sleep that night with a full stomach and a slightly guilty conscience. Tomorrow, it'll be barley again. But tonight, you dream of stew with actual flavor and bite into it with all your remaining molars. You're getting used to the cold now. Not in a "this is fine" way, but more of a resigned acceptance that warmth is something other people feel in myths and summer. You no longer flinch when your boots crunch with frost from the inside. You don't question why your tunic smells like soup. You simply pull on your layers and prepare to face the day. Because today, you're learning the true Viking art of winter fashion, the itchy, lumpy, occasionally soggy miracle that is staying alive in Scandinavian January. The first layer is linen, or something linen adjacent. A long shirt that's been patched so many times it has memories from 5 different owners. It's soft from use, thin from life, and always a little damp, because the concept of fully dry died sometime back in November. Over that comes your wool tunic, heavy, scratchy, lovingly hand-woven, and colored a shade that might once have been brown. It's thick, but never quite thick enough. Viking wool is durable, yes, but also incredibly gifted at trapping snowflakes down the back of your neck. Then, the trousers. You pull them on like you're preparing for battle. They're bulky, lumpy, reinforced at the knees with leather patches that make every step sound like you're crinkling parchment. If you're lucky, you have a belt. If not, it's rope and silent desperation. Socks. Yes, but not the cushy ones you're used to. These are woven tubes of wool with the texture of a loofah and the fit of a bread bag. You stuff your feet into them and pray. Then you wrap your lower legs with bands of wool egg bindings, they call them. Part warmth, part compression therapy, part, I hope this holds up my dignity. Then the boots. Oh, the boots. Hand-stitched leather, lined with hay or fur, depending on what's available. No insulation. No soles designed for traction. Just a commitment to not slipping into the fjord and becoming part of the ice shelf. Gloves? Optional. Mittens? Luxury. Most of the time, you just pull your sleeves over your hands and pretend they're still there. The cloak goes on last. A thick rectangle of wool, fastened at the shoulder with a bronze brooch shaped like a bird, or a bear, or something that looks vaguely dangerous. It flaps in the wind. It collects snow like a roof. It gets caught on door frames, but it's yours, and it blocks at least 2 of the 5 kinds of wind that currently exist outside. You step out of the longhouse and immediately regret everything. The air bites your skin like an opinionated aunt. Your nose tries to freeze shut. But the layers are working. Sort of. You shuffle forward, stiff and slow, like a walking mattress. Other people look just like you, bundled, hunched, woolen lumps, moving between wood piles and fish racks. Children look like miniature cloaked potatoes, bouncing through snowbanks with mittens attached to their sleeves by hope and knots. You help bring in more flax for spinning a task that requires very little skill and even less dignity. It sticks to your clothes. It tickles your nose. But it's needed, because someone is always patching something. The mending never stops. Tunics unravel. Socks wear thin. Hems fray like it's their hobby. There's a corner of the longhouse devoted entirely to stitching, where several women sit cross-legged with bone needles, thread spun from hair and wool, and expressions of eternal patience. You join them for a while. You try to fix your mitten. You stab your finger. You do it again. Someone quietly replaces you with a 5-year-old who can sew faster. There's pride in clothes here. Not in fashion, but in function. A well-patched sleeve is a sign of resourcefulness. A cloak that's been rewoven twice and still keeps the wind out? That's skill. There are no new outfits in winter. Only repaired ones, reused ones, inherited ones. Occasionally, someone pulls out a fancy tunic deed with imported plant pigments, embroidered with knots and animal forms. It's saved for feasts, ceremonies, or when someone wants to look impressive during a story circle. You try not to look too envious. That tunic probably hasn't been worn while butchering a goat. There are also rumors of fur-lined garments made from bear hide. No one admits to owning one, but everyone agrees it sounds warm and slightly cursed. Historians still argue how much color and decoration Vikings wore in daily life. Some believe their clothing was mostly practical earth tones, simple patterns, muted textures. Others point to traces of madder root reds, woad blues, and intricate tablet-woven trim as signs that even in bleak midwinter, Vikings appreciated flair. There's even evidence of imported silk used in high-status garments, traded from as far away as Byzantium, which is impressive, considering most of your clothes currently smell like wet goat. Back inside, the longhouse is alive with the hiss of damp cloaks drying by the hearth and the soft crackle of a fire that's never allowed to go out. People peel off layers and hang them on hooks carved from antlers or drape them over benches. The air is thick with the scent of lanolin, pine smoke, and overcooked onions. You sit, steaming slightly, and attempt to unlace your boots without removing your socks by accident. It's a dance of numb fingers and frozen patience. A woman across the room offers you a mug of warm ale and a sympathetic nod. She's wearing a cloak lined with squirrel pelts, each tiny tail dangling like trophies. You assume she's important. Eventually, your cloak dries. Your tunic mostly stops steaming, and your socks, though still slightly alarming, now merely damp. You count that as a win. The rest of the evening is spent mending holes, reweaving cuffs, and, in one thrilling moment, repurposing an old linen shirt into makeshift foot wraps for a cousin who stepped into a frozen puddle and pretended it was fine for 3 hours. You help. You learn. You poke yourself only twice with a needle. When it's time to sleep, you wrap yourself back into your layers, now warm and smelling faintly of pine, tar, and bread. You tuck your hands inside your tunic and your feet under the edge of the nearest dog. Outside, the wind rattles the door. Inside, you are swaddled in wool, warmed by fire, surrounded by a dozen people who all smell like boiled cabbage and still manage to survive another day. And you don't itch as much anymore. By now, you've accepted that you're not going anywhere. Not until the thaw. There's no raiding, no sailing, no shouting across ship decks with frozen sea spray in your beard. There's just the longhouse, the people in it, and the small collection of daily tasks that stand between survival and cabin fever. Which means you need a winter job. And no, there's no HR department. You're assigned work by being nearby when someone mutters they need help. You're halfway through your morning cup of barley slop when an older man plunks a wooden bowl and a dull knife in your lap and says, "Make another one of these. Don't mess it up." Just like that, you're a spoon carver. You sit by the fire, staring at the piece of birch like it personally offended you, and begin scraping. Slowly, awkwardly. Every time the wood splinters, someone winces across the room like you're carving with your feet. Daily chores vary, but none are glamorous. There's wool to spin, rope to twist, nets to untangle, sheep dung to relocate, and in particularly blessed day chamber pots to dump. That last one is usually assigned to whoever forgot to feed the dog or insulted the stew. You keep your head down and whittle. Hours pass like moss growing on a rock. The longhouse hums with quiet activity. Someone sharpens blades. Someone else is trying to repair a cracked clay pot using pitch and heated nails. A child runs by holding what you're pretty sure is your mitten, now repurposed as a doll hat. There's no calendar here, no weekend, no holidays. Only the weather and the jobs that keep the roof from falling in, or the goats from getting inside. Again, mid-morning, someone asks you to help with the loom. You nod, not entirely sure what that means. An older woman hands you a shuttle and points to where the wool threads hang like frozen waterfalls. She shows you how to pass the thread through, beat it down, pass again, beat again. It's hypnotic, repetitive, almost soothing until you knock the whole frame sideways with your elbow and pretend it didn't happen. You spend an hour carding raw wool, pulling burrs and twigs from the fibers. Your fingers go numb. You get poked by a splinter. You sneeze so hard the dog gets up and leaves the building. Still, It's better than the latrine shift. Let's talk about that. The outhouse is a polite fiction. In winter, it's a frozen hole in the ground, surrounded by a screen of woven reeds, downwind and well outside the longhouse. Getting there means layering up, tying your cloak tight, and trudging through snow that bites your ankles like angry eels. Inside the pit, ice, frozen droppings, a smell that somehow survives the cold. There's a bucket of frozen moss for wiping, and you try not to think too hard about it. Someone tells you about the time a man fell in after slipping on his own frozen breath. You don't ask for clarification. You just hold the torch a little higher. There's a constant battle to keep walkways clear. Ice forms on every surface. You shovel snow with a flat piece of driftwood. You salt the steps with old fish guts. You learn the hard way that wool soles on frost-slick boards are a recipe for dramatic, dignity-free tumbles. Sometimes, someone just disappears into the white for hours, muttering about checking the traps. You don't ask what they're trapping. You just nod and hand them a frozen sausage for luck. Back inside, you finally finish your spoon. It's crooked, lumpy, slightly resembles a weapon. You hand it to the old man, expecting laughter. He looks at it, grunts, and says, "Better than last year's." You beam. That's basically a medal. Evenings are calmer. People sit in circles, fixing, shaping, nodding. One man spends an entire week rewrapping axe handles with seal hide. Another is making a net for summer fishing, not by slow knot, by firelight, eyes half closed. Crafts are currency here. Skill is survival. If your boots tear, someone can stitch them. If your roof leaks, someone knows how to weave more thatch. No one's idle not because they're workaholics, but because idleness is the enemy. It lets in the cold, the hunger, the thoughts about how far away spring still is. So you keep your hands busy. You learn to sharpen knives on river stones. You learn to melt pitch without burning off your eyebrows. You accidentally make a very small, very ugly comb that the children immediately turn into a toy for the goat. It's fine, you're learning. Winter isn't loud. It isn't full of glory or blood or treasure. It's quiet work, shared meals, fingers stiff with cold and stained with soot. It's chores that blur together, and days that slide past like frost off a roof. But every task you complete, everything you mend or shape or stitch, is one more stone in the wall that keeps the cold outside. You're not raiding. You're building something, and somehow, that's just as fierce. It's deep winter now, the kind of cold that makes the air feel solid, and the door hinges groan like they're mourning the sun. Outside, the snow is knee-high, drifted against the sides of the longhouse like soft, frozen waves. And inside? Inside, the children have declared war on silence. You had forgotten what it meant to be trapped indoors with a small Viking horde of sugar-fueled chaos goblins. They're everywhere. Under benches, behind barrels, perched on rafters. One of them just slid across the floor on a hide and crashed into the firewood pile like it was the Olympics. You try not to react. You're learning that indoor Viking children are equal parts mischief, imagination, and noise. Lots of noise. They don't have school. They don't have toys in the modern sense. But they have sticks, bones, bits of cloth, and an absolutely endless supply of invented games that all seem to involve yelling and light injuries. Today's entertainment involves a carved walrus tusk, a braided cord, and the goat's feed bowl. You don't know the rules. You just know someone is going to cry. Their mothers occasionally yell at them, but mostly with affection like, "I see you've broken the good spoon again," rather than "stop summoning a storm indoors." Parenting here is more relaxed than you expect, but also more intense. Children are expected to pitch in from an early age. And by pitch in we mean haul firewood, feed animals, help spin wool, and occasionally hold still while someone stitches a tear in your sleeve with the needle you were using as a sword 5 minutes earlier. You see a girl of about 7 expertly darning a sock, tongue sticking out in concentration, while her younger brother tries to wear a pot as a helmet and slips on a turnip peel. No one reacts. This is normal. You help mend a broken toy, a small wooden ox with wheels, hand-carved from driftwood and held together with string and pure stubbornness. One of the kids shows you how to make it move by shaking it in a specific way. You're impressed, a little concerned, but mostly impressed. Play is improvised. Snowballs are thrown. Walls become castles. Benches become boats. Every blanket is a cave or a battlefield. It's chaos, but organized chaos woven into the fabric of longhouse life. When the noise gets to be too much, someone pulls out a bone flute and starts playing a tune that sort of resembles music. The children dance, leap, shout, fall over. One manages to spin until they collide with the dog. The dog sighs and walks away. There are also games of skill. Stick wrestling, pebble toss, balance challenges where kids walk the center beam of the longhouse while chanting insults. You watch one boy hop across the benches without touching the floor while holding a piece of bread on his head. You suspect this is either a training exercise or a punishment, possibly both. And yes, they fight. Small spats over toys, food, who gets to sit closest to the fire. You break one up by handing over your spare mitten, which is instantly turned into a puppet named Gunner the Sleepy. You're honored, slightly wary, but honored. Learning happens constantly, though rarely formally. Children absorb everything. How to braid rope, how to slice fish, how to start a fire with flint and stubbornness. They watch, they mimic, they participate. You see a 10-year-old girl show a 6-year-old how to stretch a hide without ruining it. No one lectures, no one tests. They just do. Sometimes, if the weather breaks for a few hours, they're allowed outside to roll in snow, shout into the wind, and burn off energy before returning, red-faced and trailing icy footprints. You help hang their cloaks near the hearth, trying not to notice how many of them smell like mud and something suspiciously fermented. At night, they wind down only slightly. There are stories-long, winding tales told in soft voices, sometimes about gods and giants, sometimes about real ancestors who did something brave, clever, or ridiculous. The children listen with wide eyes, nestled in blankets, heads in laps, fingers tangled in the fringe of cloaks. Someone always falls asleep, mid-sentence. Someone else asks a question that leads to another story. It never ends. It just slows. Like the fire. Like the winter itself. You realize the longhouse is built not just to endure winter, but to hold life within it. These children are loud, messy, inventive, and absolutely vital. They're what the cold can't touch. What it shouldn't touch. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak, sip lukewarm ale, and watch as one child tucks a carved wooden figure under their straw pillow protection, they say, from frost spirits that nibble fingers in the night. You believe them. Sleep comes softly, layered in laughter and soot, as the smallest of the children curl into the quiet, safe hum of the longhouse. Tomorrow, they'll be wild again. Tonight, they're just dreams waiting to grow. By the time midwinter arrives, you've grown comfortable with most aspects of longhouse life. You can eat cold barley mush without wincing. You know which dogs are friendlier than they look. You've even learned to tune out most of the snoring. But there's one task you still dread. One sacred Viking rite of seasonal passage that no amount of wool layering can prepare you for. Taking out the waste. No one talks about it. Not with joy. Not with pride. But everyone knows when it's your turn. Someone coughs. Someone else makes direct eye contact. A chamber pot is placed just a little too close to your bedding. That's the sign. You brace yourself, because when the snow is 2 feet deep and the outhouse is a suggestion buried beneath a drift, waste removal becomes a creative exercise. Let's be clear. There's no plumbing here. No tidy pipes. No toilet paper pyramid in the corner. What you have is a collection of chamber pots, slop buckets, and a shared understanding that things have to go somewhere. Most of the time, that somewhere is the midden heap, a carefully chosen pile of refuse, just far enough from the longhouse to avoid constant smell, but close enough to reach without losing a toe to frostbite. You load up the sled, 3 pots, 1 sloshy bucket, a cloth to cover your face, and a stick to poke any suspicious mounds of ice that might be hiding last week's mistake. The snow crunches under your boots. The wind laughs in your ears. You trudge like a hero with a very unfortunate job. The midden is a bizarre landscape, part dump, part compost pile, part archaeological gift to the future. It's layered with ash, bones, broken pottery, vegetable peels, fish guts, and the byproducts of 20 people sharing a single fire and no secrets. You dump your load, cover it with some clean snow, and shuffle back inside, face red, fingers stiff, dignity frayed. Inside, no one thanks you. But someone quietly moves a fresh pot near the fire, and you know you've earned your place. This is winter waste management, and it never stops. Some communities used privies dug into the frozen ground, but in deep winter, these often became useless frozen holes unless you were willing to chip through a layer of frost with a stick and questionable intentions. More commonly, people just went in the same pot all day, and someone, you, emptied it. Urine had its usette was kept in clay jars to be used in tanning hides or even cleaning wool. The rest? Well, it got buried or frozen or ignored until spring. It's not glamorous, but it works. You also become familiar with the ashes. Ashes are life. You use them to clean bowls, to degrease hands, to absorb spills, and to cover waste. Some people sprinkle them in their boots to fight odor. Others use ash paste for minor skin infections. You once saw a woman rub ash on a fish to bring out the flavor. You tried it. You regret it. Every few days, someone sweeps the hearth and redistributes the ash. There's a rhythm to it. Scoop, dump, scatter. The floor stays dusty, yes, but it's a clean dusty. The kind that says, "We live here," not "we gave up." You help a child carry a slop bucket one morning, and they point out the patterns in the midden, where shells gather, where bones pile, where the refuse from feasts has left dark, rich stains. It's weirdly beautiful. A map of meals and memories. Someday, they say with a grin, someone will dig this up and think we were giants. You believe them, because middens are time capsules. Archaeologists today piece together entire histories from these frozen dumps: what people ate, how they lived, what broke, what they valued enough to toss or keep. Your waste is someone else's treasure, or at least someone else's dissertation. Back in the longhouse, you scrub your hands with sand and ash, rinse with warm snow water, and sit by the fire. No one says a word, but someone passes you a bowl of stew, and someone else scoots over to make room. That's Viking gratitude. Subtle, shared, quiet. Later, you help refill the moss-bent Viking version of toilet paper. Soft clumps of dried moss, sometimes soaked in herbs, sometimes frozen solid and mildly judgmental. It works. Mostly. You add a few fir needles for scent. You're told that's fancy. By nightfall, the fire is burning low, and your back aches in a new, very specific way. But your chores are done. The longhouse is warm. The pots are empty. The midden is fed. You sleep a little deeper that night. Not just because the hearth is hot and the wool is thick, but because you've truly earned your rest. It's strange, you think, as you drift off, how winter humbles everyone. Even the ones who once raided monasteries. Even the ones with very nice cloaks. Even you. The night stretches on longer than your patience. You wake around midnight to someone coughing, someone shifting, someone whispering a half-remembered saga in their sleep. You roll over, trying to sink back into your straw bed, but your corner of the longhouse is cold again, and the dog you've been using as a foot warmer has abandoned you for someone with better snacks. So you do what everyone else eventually does in Viking winter. You sit by the fire and wait for morning. And that's when the stories begin. You're not the only one awake. Across the hearth, an older man with a beard like tangled rope and eyebrows that have seen battles you'll never understand lifts his head. He grunts a greeting. Then he starts talking. Not softly, not loudly, just steadily. Like he's picking up where he left off 5 nights ago. The saga of someone's grandfather's grandfather, who once wrestled a sea serpent or maybe just a particularly large eel, who outdrank a Saxon and outwitted a troll, who wore sealskin boots that never froze and spoke only in rhymes on feast days. The details shift, but the point is always the same. Winter is long, and stories are armor. Soon, others stir. A woman throws a log on the fire. A boy sits up with a blanket around his shoulders. You watch the room slowly fill with listening heads nodding, eyes squinting, lips twitching with half smiles. And then, someone else chimes in. A boast, of course. This one's younger, with a braided mustache and the energy of someone who thinks winter is the perfect time to practice insults. He tells a story of his summer voyage, how he bested 3 men in a wrestling match and built his own oarlock from driftwood and guts. A third person challenges him. Guts don't hold shape, they mutter. So he starts to sing. It's not a song exactly. It's a verse part memory, part invention, all delivered in the rhythmic, chant-like style of Viking skalds. The lines don't quite rhyme, but they fall in a pattern that feels like snow landing on a roof. Measured, heavy, inevitable. You listen as the verse dances between bragging and poetry, telling of waves higher than trees, wolves the size of horses, and a dream he had where Odin gave him advice on boat design. It sounds ridiculous. And yet, somehow, it works. Because here, in this longhouse, poetry isn't luxury. It's survival. Vikings didn't write down most things they remembered. They recited. They performed. And winter was the perfect season for it. No plowing, no raiding, just long dark nights and enough time to turn boredom into legend. You hear love poems disguised as weather reports. You hear insults so well worded they sound like compliments. You hear stories of raids that probably never happened, and of animals that definitely never existed. But it doesn't matter. No one corrects the speaker. No one stops to fact-check. That's not the point. The point is rhythm, presence, warmth. There's a tradition called flighting, a kind of poetic duel, like Viking battle rap. It starts small. Someone throws a line. Someone else throws one back. Soon, it's a verbal snowball fight of clever jabs, sharp metaphors, and light-hearted jabs about someone's cooking or lack of facial hair. It's funny, it's harmless. Mostly. Tonight's flighting centers on who's the worst at chopping wood. The verses get sillier. Accusations of hugging trees instead of felling them. Comparisons to wet ducks. Someone rhymes, splinter, with can't light a fire in winter. And the room erupts with sleepy laughter. Even the goat makes a noise that might be approval. You're invited to join. You panic, offer a terrible rhyme about frozen bread and reindeer instead. It's awful. They cheer anyway. Because in Viking winter, it's not about perfection. It's about participation. Someone produces a harp. Not a grand one, just a small 7-string lyre made from antler and horse gut. They pluck a few notes. The song is slow, meandering, like the footsteps of someone walking a snowy path just to remember what it feels like. And you let it carry you. Stories melt the cold. Poetry stretches the night. And song, however off-key, fills the spaces the wind tries to sneak into. You're still cold. Your jaw still aches. But your heart feels a little fuller. Eventually, the fire dims. The songs fade. People drift back to their beds, the longhouse humming again with the quiet noise of breathing and occasional snorts. You lie back down, head full of sagas and half-formed rhymes. You whisper one to yourself, eyes closed, just to hear how it sounds in the dark. The fire is low, the snow is deep, but we who speak are warm in sleep. It's not great, but it's yours. You wake to the smell of blood and bread. Not a combination you'd expect, but today's different. Today is a ritual Daya midwinter celebration, or at least something that looks like one if you squint and don't ask too many questions. It's not quite a feast, not quite a festival. More of a communal gesture to keep the gods from getting bored or angry. No one says this out loud, of course. They just start preparing. Quietly, deliberately. You help sweep out the longhouse, brush ash from the hearthstones, lay out clean straw along the walls. There's a tension in the air, not fear. Not quite, but a kind of reverence that sits heavy, like snow on a sagging roof. You're told the celebration is for Chiori, the spirit of deep winter. Or maybe it's for Freyr, god of fertility. Or Odin, who always seems to show up whether he's invited or not. It depends who you ask and what region they came from. Historians still argue whether these rites were standardized seasonal festivals or loosely connected local traditions, involving whatever the village had left in the pantry. But one thing is certain. You're sacrificing something today. Not a person, relax. A goat. It's already been chosen, a shaggy, unimpressed creature tied near the woodpile and chewing through its rope with alarming calm. You pat it gently. It sneezes on your sleeve. The ritual takes place outdoors, in a stone circle near the edge of the village, half buried in snow and ringed with dark, towering trees. You follow the others through the morning hush, cloaks drawn tight, breath pluming like ghost signals. The goat is led in front. The children are unusually quiet. An elder, wrapped in a red-dyed tunic with antlers tied to his belt, stands in the center. He begins chanting. The words are old, older than the longhouse, older than the road you took to get here. You don't understand them, but they ripple the hair on your neck just the same. The goat is offered. There's no spectacle, no drama. Just a clean motion, a shallow bowl, and a short moment of silence as the blood is collected. Then, the bread. Loaves shaped like suns, moons, hammers, dotted with seeds, some sweetened with honey, others plain, meant to be broken and shared in silence. The blood is sprinkled around the stones, around the people, and over the bread, a thin mist in the cold air. It's a gesture symbolic, respectful, a reminder that even in the dead of winter, there's still a cycle. Give, receive, endure. You're handed a piece of the bread. Warm. Dense. Tastes like ash and anise. You chew slowly, standing in the cold with 20 others, all breathing as one. The goat is gone now, but no one mourns. This is what's done. This is how you make it to spring. Back in the longhouse, the mood shifts. The solemn morning gives way to a mild celebration. The meat is prepared roasted over the hearth, basted with what little ale remains. Herbs are sprinkled like treasure. Someone even finds a shriveled apple and slices it as thin as coins to share. There's laughter now. Singing, not the slow, poetic kind from the night before, but real, knee-slapping, elbow-jabbing songs about turnips, mead spills, and the time someone fell asleep in the midden. The kids run wild again, faces sticky with goat fat. Someone pulls out a carved mask and dances awkwardly in the firelight. Another throws a log on the hearth with dramatic flair and nearly knocks over the stew pot. It's not a feast, but it's close. You sit with a bowl of meat and barley, a hunk of honeyed bread, and ale that's warmer than it should be. You drink slowly, savoring it. Not just the flavor, but the moment. Because in Viking winter, joy is strategic. You take it where you can. A good meal, a shared joke, a warm corner by the fire where the draft doesn't quite reach. These midwinter rituals aren't about abundance. They're about defiance. A reminder that you're still here, still breathing, still together. Later, Someone lights a small torch from the hearth and walks a slow circle around the longhouse's interior. It's a blessing, a protection, a way to ask the gods to look kindly on your roof and your bones. You touch the wall as they pass. The torch crackles. The room glows, and for a moment, it feels like the dark outside pauses, just briefly before creeping on. You've spent weeks now shoulder to shoulder with the same people. You've shared food, chores, stories, blankets, and approximately 1 million sighs. And now, you're beginning to understand a deeper, unspoken truth about Viking winter. It's not the cold that tests you, it's the closeness. There's no escape from each other, no doors to close, no rooms to retreat into for some quiet alone time. Privacy, that's a summer luxury. Here, in the longhouse, you learn to live with everyone's everything. Their smells, their habits, their moods, their morning breath. Your neighbor talks in their sleep, loudly, and once, possibly in Old Norse dialect. The elder across the hearth snores like a collapsing barn. Two brothers have been quietly feuding over a misplaced belt for 5 days now, and it's starting to get poetic. Then there's the romantic tension. Oh yes. Even in sub-zero temperatures and 4 layers of wool, people flirt. And Viking-style flirtation is subtle. Subtle like a sideways glance while passing a bowl of fish. Subtle like carving someone's name into a bit of antler. Subtle like leaving the slightly warmer corner of the fire pit open for someone specific. There's no dating app here, but there is a surprising amount of sitting very close and pretending it's about warmth. And if a relationship happens, well, everyone knows. Instantly. There's no whispering behind the mead barrels. You sneeze differently the next morning, and someone raises an eyebrow. A few nods are exchanged. It's done. Love, such as it is, becomes part of the fabric of the house, just another thread in the weaving. But so does conflict. You try to stay out of it, but one day the two weavers get into a heated argument over thread tension, which escalates into a full-blown passive-aggressive spinning competition. Another night. Someone adds too much salt to the stew and is gently exiled to the draftiest corner of the house for 3 days. Still, for all the tension, no one is truly alone. You might argue, you might stew, literally. But when someone falls ill, everyone helps. When a cloak tears, it's mended by 3 people before the day is out. When your boots freeze solid, someone lends you their second-best pair and pretends not to mind. That's the thing. This closeness is unbearable and essential. It wears you down, yes, but it also holds you together. You start to see the little kindnesses more clearly now. A cousin passing you the slightly softer chunk of bread. A child braiding your hair while pretending it's practice. A stranger throwing an extra log on the fire just because you were shivering in your sleep. You help an old woman trim leather for mittens, and she tells you about her first winter in this longhouse how she cried every night for a month, and no one noticed until she stopped crying and started baking instead. Bread makes better company than tears, she says, handing you a burnt crust. You agree. There's also a shared understanding of boundaries, even in this boundaryless space. You learn the polite signals for, "Don't talk to me right now." They range from aggressive wool spinning to pretending to be asleep. You use both, often, and yet there's humor. The kind born from necessity, from repetition, from knowing that if you don't laugh at the absurdity of wearing a goat as a scarf, you'll lose your mind. Someone starts a daily tally of who says spring first each day. If it's you, you have to fetch snow for cooking. You don't say spring again for a week. Another person crafts snowflake charms out of bone shavings and hangs them from the rafters. To confuse the winter spirits, they claim. Or to decorate. Hard to say. You begin adding your own. A tiny wooden carving of a fish. A scrap of red thread knotted around a nail. A piece of your now too small mitten. It becomes a winter tree of sorts, cluttered with bits and jokes and shared superstition. And one night, The tension finally breaks in the best way. It starts with someone telling a joke so bad you snort ale through your nose. Then a second joke. Then a wildly exaggerated story involving a chicken, a bear, and a very slippery bridge. Laughter erupts. Full-bodied, hiccuping, can't breathe kind of laughter. People double over. Someone drops a bowl. The fire flares as someone accidentally kicks it. And for a momentone long, glorious moment you forget it's winter. You're not cold. You're not tired. You're not stuck. You're just here, with these people, laughing at the same terrible joke in the same smoky room, under the same roof that you used to think was too small. You fall asleep smiling, a little too warm, a little too aware of the snores around you, but content, because sometimes survival is just staying in the room, together. You wake up sore in places you didn't even know could be sore, all from a task you never thought could be so dangerous, fixing a shield. It started innocently. Someone handed you a round board with a split down the middle and said, "This was Father's. Make it better." No instructions, no warnings, just a shield, a pile of scrap leather, and a look that said, "Don't embarrass the ancestors." Winter, it turns out, is the season for maintenance. There are no battles to fight, no raids to prepare for, but every axe, every buckle, every wagon part, every needle, everything that broke in warmer months and got shoved into a corner with a grunt comes out now. Because once spring hits, everything has to work again. Or else, you begin with the shield, a crack down the center, rim frayed, the iron boss on the front rusted just enough to look like it's frowning. You spend most of the morning hammering out the dented metal with a rock. It echoes through the longhouse with the steady rhythm of self-doubt. Someone hands you seal oil to soften the old leather edge. It smells like fermented fish and wet sadness. You try not to breathe while applying it. Meanwhile, others are fixing sled runners with pine tar and heated nails. A boy is rewrapping the grip on a sword that hasn't seen action since the last drunken feast fight. A woman nearby is weaving arrow fletching using feathers from the one bird that somehow wandered north too late and regretted everything. You're surrounded by a quiet orchestra of tapping, stitching, scraping, sanding. It's not glamorous. It's not even satisfying at first. But there's a rhythm to it. Like everything else in this longhouse life. And then someone yelps. You look over. A man has jabbed his finger with a bone awl while trying to resew a boot. Blood. Not much, but enough to merit sympathy and maybe a dramatic curse. He wraps it quickly with a bit of linen and brags that this is the 4th time this week. Everyone applauds. You suspect this is a contest now. In the corner, a child drops a heavy clay mug. It cracks cleanly in half. The mother doesn't yell. She just scoops up the pieces, wraps them in cloth, and sets them aside for repair later. Everything gets fixed here. Nothing is wasted, not even a broken spoon. You see someone boiling animal sinew to use as thread. Another carves buttons from antler. A third is scraping fur from a hide, muttering to themselves in a way that implies a long, personal history with this particular piece of leather. You return to your shield. Add a crossbeam reinforcement. Wrap the rim with new rawhide. Rub the surface with lard to keep the wood from splitting again. When you're done, it still looks a little battered, but now it looks cared for. There's pride in that. You help hang tools over the fire to dry knives, hatchets, chisels. Everything smells like smoke and salt and effort. You run a whetstone over a blade until your hands cramp, and by the end of the day, your fingertips are blistered, and your shoulders feel like they've been used for target practice. But you've contributed. You've earned your seat. Dinner is quiet, thick with the steam of boiling barley and leftover goat meat. Your hands are stained, your tunic smells like glue and charcoal, and when someone asks who fixed the shield, a few heads turn your way. You just nod. The truth is, crafting and repairing are more than chores, they're memory work. Every patch, every new stitch, every polished nail is part of the long thread that ties this season to the next. When the snow melts and the longhouse opens again, these things you mended will go out into the world. Your stitches, your hammer strikes, your sweat. Historians have found all kinds of handcrafted Viking artifacts, wooden toys, combs, loom weights, decorated sheaths, carved bowls, many worn smooth with generations of use. Some were buried with their owners. Others were passed down, patched and repatched, until their original shape was more memory than material. You realize, as you hold the repaired shield in your lap, that this is the work winter was made for, not conquest, not retreat, but quiet, enduring preservation, keeping what matters alive, fixing what breaks, sharpening what was dulled, including yourself. You stretch out near the fire, hands aching, back stiff, but heart strangely settled. The room glows softly with lamplight, and the quiet scrape of someone still working a little longer. You don't stop them. You understand now. This is how you last through the long dark. One stitch, one nail, one splinter at a time. You've adjusted to most of Viking winter by now, the itchy tunics, the fish-flavored everything, the lingering scent of goat, but nothing could have prepared you for what happens when the ale runs low. It begins with murmurs. Someone lifts a clay jug and shakes it. Nothing. Another person checks the barrels stored by the back wall, taps them, tilts them, listens, like they're trying to hear the future. Still nothing. The longhouse falls into a subtle, collective silence, as if the absence of ale might be reversed if no one makes a sound. And then someone says it. We're down to one jug. Gasps. One child bursts into tears. Someone else dramatically wraps themselves in a cloak and mutters about omens. You watch in awe, because in Viking winter, ale is not just a drink, it's warmth, it's energy. It's the daily reminder that barley once danced under a summer sun and decided not to kill you. And now, it's almost gone. You're told the next brew won't be ready for another 2 weeks. The grain was late soaking, the hearth was too smoky, and the last batch fermented itself into something that smelled like betrayal and boiled onions. So, you begin the long, dry countdown. The final jug is placed under guard. Well, metaphorical guard. It's tucked into a woven basket, covered with a fur, and only opened for special moments. A story that's particularly good, a night when someone's tooth finally stops hurting, or when the stew doesn't taste like regret. In the meantime, you're offered alternatives. The first is herb tea, warm, bitter brew made from dried leaves, moss, and whatever someone found under the floorboards. You sip it politely. It tastes like boiled socks with a whisper of pine. But it's hot, and your hand's like that. Then comes meadow sweet water, cold infusion of flowers steeped in snowmelt, said to ease digestion and boost morale. You try it. You're not sure if morale is boosted, but at least it doesn't ferment in your stomach like old ale sometimes did. Some of the elders turn to milk, thinned with water, and warmed by the hearth. Others sneak spoonfuls of honey mixed with hot snow water. Poor man's mead, someone calls it. It's sweet, comforting, almost cheerful. Until it isn't, because the truth is, nothing replaces ale. It's not the buzz people miss. It's the ritual. The way it softens a cold night. The way it opens people up, loosens their voices, encourages songs and confessions and declarations of eternal love to someone who passed you a spoon once last September. Without it, things grow tense. A minor argument about firewood stacking turns into a full philosophical debate on which direction logs should face. Someone else starts loudly critiquing the cooking, not enough salt, becomes fighting words. The children turn wild. The dog steals half a turnip, and no one stops him. And then, like a gift from the godsore, at least from the back of the storage, shed someone finds a jug of birch sap wine. It's old. Possibly from 2 winters ago. It's cloudy, a little gritty, but it pours, and that's all anyone cares about. Cups are passed, toasts are mumbled. You raise your mug with everyone else and drink. It's earthy, like fermented tree breath, but it works. Spirits lift. Someone starts drumming on a bowl. Someone else sings a song that's mostly humming. Even the goat gets in on the action, bleating along like an over-enthusiastic background singer. You feel it in your chest, not the drink, but the relief. The sense that even now, even in the hardest weeks, someone thought to save something. The next day, the brewers get serious. You're pulled in to help, of course. First comes soaking the grain, then drying it near the hearth, then the long, slow mash, stirring with a stick so big it could double as a spear. The sweet smell of barley wort fills the longhouse. People gather near the pot, sniffing like wolves, catching the scent of hope. You learn the magic of yeast, though no one calls it that. They say, the gods wake up the brew. You nod solemnly, and avoid pointing out that it smells exactly like wet bread. Who are you to argue with divine fermentation? For days, you monitor the barrels, cover them, uncover them, tap them, whisper encouragement. And then, one cold morning, someone dips a ladle, tastes, nods. It's ready. There's no parade, just quiet joy. The cups come out, the voices rise. A story begins, and the longhouse exhales again. You take your sip. Warm, bitter, familia, like sunlight in liquid form, carried through time by grain and fire and patience. The cold hasn't left. The chores haven't stopped. But there's ale again. And that's enough. For now, you've stopped counting the days. Or maybe you never really started. Time in Viking winter doesn't march at sloshes, slides, loops. The sun comes and goes like a shy guest, and the moon feels less like a celestial object and more like a vague rumor. But today feels different. You wake to bird song. Faint, tentative like the bird, isn't sure it wants to commit. You open your eyes to a slightly warmer breeze, filtering through the roof slats, and the sound of drip, drip, drip snow, melting from the eaves. Outside, the snow is slushy, slumped in patches, and mud peeks through like the earth is yawning. A dog runs past with one paw in a boot. Someone slips, curses, and declares the ice half dead. Everyone cheers. It's not spring, not yet, but it's coming. And that means one thing: boats. Because while Viking raiders are famous for the act of raiding, the truth is they spend far more time building, repairing, and dreaming about boats than actually sailing them. Winter may belong to the longhouse, but spring belongs to the shipyard. You head to the beach, where the longships have slept under snow and tarpaulins. The keels are frosted, the ropes stiff with cold, but they're intact, waiting, patient. Work begins immediately. The boats are uncovered, their bellies exposed to the watery sunlight. You help scrape off layers of grime and sea salt. The hulls are checked for cracks, gaps, warping. You fetch tools, chisels, wedges, pitch pots, long-handled hammers that feel older than some of the people swinging them. It's slow, satisfying work. You learn how to re-caulk seams with twisted moss and tar, how to shape new oarlocks from ashwood, how to test for weak planks by thumping them with your knuckles and listening for the sound of betrayal. And while you work, people talk not about chores or food or firewood, but about where they'll go. That's the true currency of spring. Imagination. Someone dreams of heading west, toward the islands where sheep outnumber men. Another speaks of sailing south, to find silver and silk and spices with names they can't pronounce. One man, old and half frostbitten, insists he once saw a land where the trees weep syrup and the sun sets in the sea. No one corrects him. No one needs to. Because right now, every sound of melting snow is a drumbeat for future journeys. At night, by the hearth, the stories shift. Less brooding. More forward-facing. Children carve ships into bits of wood, their stubby hulls covered in charcoal smudges. You see a woman knitting a woolen cloak in colors you haven't seen in months, green and blue, and the yellow of something that might, one day, be sunshine. You help a blacksmith sharpen a set of boarding axes. He hums while he works. You ask what he's singing. "It's for the boat," he says. And suddenly, you understand that the Viking ship is not just transportation. It's a shrine, a beast of wood and will and shared purpose. It gets named, it gets fed. Some people speak to their ship like a lover, others like a god. But no one disrespects the vessel that may one day carry them over the edge of the world. Historians know that shipbuilding was a year-round concern. But in winter, boats lived in dreams, in sketches scratched on walls, in whispered plans over bowls of fish broth. Now, with the ice retreating and the fjords starting to glisten, those dreams get pulled from their hangars, polished, patched, and re-rigged. Someone cuts a new sail from wool dyed rust red. You help carry it across the snowmelt, trying not to let it drag in the mud. It smells like lanolin and wind. Someone else brings out the oars, lines them up, checks for warping. Each one is marked, carved with a rune, an animal, a name. You see yours sits crooked, but it's yours. You don't know where you're going yet, but it's enough to know you'll go somewhere, that the world beyond the longhouse is still out there waiting. And so you work. You scrub. You sand. You oil. And that night, your dreams are full of waves, sails, laughter carried on wind that doesn't bite. You wake to the sound of gulls. And for the first time in months, your heart stretches, like a ship sliding from dry land into open water. By now, your body knows how to move without thinking, layering clothes by instinct, brushing snow off the woodpile before you sit, reaching for the right pot by sound alone. You've become a creature of the longhouse. One of them. Even your walk has changed. A little slower, more deliberate, the kind of pace you only earn when you've survived a Viking winter on purpose. And just when it seems the routine will stretch into eternity, it happens. The last storm. It arrives overnight, without warning. One moment, it's early spring melt and optimism. The next, the wind howls like it's angry at the idea of progress. The snow returns not gently, not quietly, but sideways and in sheets, hurling itself at the longhouse walls like it was waiting for this final act. The roof groans. The door slams open and shut until someone wedges it with a bone hook. Smoke clings low in the rafters. For 2 days, no one goes out. No one even wants to. You all press inward closer to the hearth, closer to the old songs, closer to each other. You think the storm is a betrayal, a slap from winter as it's being shown the door. But the others? They treat it like a friend, saying goodbye with too much enthusiasm. "It always does this," someone mutters. "A last tantrum." Another adds, "You should have seen the one 5 winters ago," says a third. Who then proceeds to tell you a tale involving lightning, a reindeer, and a lightning-struck reindeer. You sit and listen. The fire burns hot. The stew is thick and actually flavorful for once. Someone opens the very last jar of pickled onions and declares it a feast. You toast with thin ale and freeze-dried sarcasm. And then, the wind stops. Just like that. You step outside. The world is white again, but not the same white. Softer, soggy. You hear the steady drip of melting ice, the creak of snow giving way, and somewhere in the distance, the crack of something falling off a tree. The air smells different, like wet bark and newness. You breathe it in and realize, this is the last day. Inside, the longhouse stirs. Bundles are unpacked. Sails are checked again. People talk about the fjord, how the ice has begun to break, how the current is showing through like a promise. Boats are shifted closer to the shoreline. Oars are sanded one final time. The sun lingers longer in the sky, shy but steady. And so you begin to pack. Your bedroll, your tools, your newly sharpened knife. The spoon you carved 2 moons ago that still looks like a weapon but works just fine. Your patched cloak. Your now beloved boots. Someone hands you a pouch of dried meat and flatbread. Someone else braids your hair, tight and neat, for the journey ahead. A child you barely spoke to presses a carved wooden fish into your palm. For luck. You don't ask why. You just nod and tuck it in your belt. You sit one final night by the fire. No one talks much. There's no need. The crackle of flame is enough. The weight of shared silence, of having endured something together. Spring doesn't arrive with trumpets. It sneaks in quietly, through puddles and bird calls and the simple act of no longer shivering. You survived. You survived the cold, the closeness, the food, the boredom, the endless repetition of winter days that tried to blur into each other. You didn't raid a village. You didn't find treasure. But you made it, and now the boat waits. The sea waits. Whatever comes next waits. As the last log collapses in the hearth, you look around one last time. The ash-stained rafters, the woven mats, the faces half-lit in firelight, the smell of wool and smoke and roasted barley. This was your winter, and it will never happen exactly like this again. You close your eyes and dream of waves. The longhouse is quiet now. Outside, the snow softens with every passing hour. The wind has finally let go of its grip, leaving only the hush of melting ice and the occasional creak of a board settling into peace. You lie back on your bed of straw and wool, arms loose at your sides, your breath slower, deeper. The warmth of the fire still lingers in the air, in your clothes, in the ache of muscles that learned what it means to work for the sake of others. There is nothing left to do tonight. No goats to feed, no stew to stir, no boots to patch, only rest. Only the hush of a world thawing back to life. You hear the gentle drip of meltwater, the far-off call of a returning bird, the low murmur of someone nearby shifting in sleep. All of it blends together, one soft sound after another, like waves brushing up against the hull of a boat you haven't launched yet. You're safe now. The worst is over, and in its place, there's only this moment, the warmth of your blanket, the slow beat of your heart, and the dream of something new waiting just beyond the shoreline. So breathe in, let it go, and drift. Tomorrow, you'll row, but tonight, you float.